I'm about to tell you a story about one woman's survival through harsh environment, her struggle in a foreign land, and all the hardships she had to endure far away from her home. A story about how local people one day found strange woman, were intrigued by her very presence, and how they eventually accepted her as one of their own. This is a story about Princess Caraboo from the Pacific island of Javasu. It has a tiny twist at the end, so stick around. But before going any further, you know the drill already. Subscribe and like the video and turn on all the notifications while you're at it. Right before Easter in 1817, on Maundy Thursday, in a small village of Almondsbury, just some 8 miles north from Bristol, there was quite a scene. There was a young woman with quite a strange clothes, wearing a black shawl over her head, a single soap and some coins on her person, one of which was even counterfeit. She was going on around the village, knocking on all the doors, and whenever someone opened, she was speaking in an unfamiliar language. At this point she might have even sounded like an alien to the locals. But when she got to the village's cobbler's door and knocked, the man subsequently opened the door and saw the young woman, who appeared in her 20s, was just asking for some food and water. So he brought her in to her wife, and both of them couldn't understand the words she was saying. The only thing they did understand was when she was pointing at herself and saying Caraboo, and they took it as her name. It was obvious that they couldn't take care of her, so they took her to the overseer of the poor, whose job was to administer a relief in form of food, money or shelter to those in dire needs. Unfortunately, the overseer, Mr. Hill, also had no idea what to do with her. She could very well be a criminal for all he knew. Her counterfeit sixpence was what troubled him, so he took her to the local magistrate. Samuel Worrell, the magistrate who lived in a Knoll Park house, took the poor girl in and, along with his wife Elizabeth, tried to get as many information as possible from the young girl. Sadly, their efforts were in vain. The language barrier was just too much for them to handle, and since they took a liking to a girl, they had to do something about it. Obviously, it was out of question that she could stay at Knoll. A magistrate of such position cannot be taking whoever. He has a certain image to uphold. But luckily his wife managed to book a room in the local inn, the Bowl, in Almondsbury. Before setting her off, Mr. Worrell asked the girl to note something down, to write something on a piece of paper. Anything would do, so that he could send it to his friends at Oxford University for deciphering. Now, over there in Bowl, it was discovered by chance that the girl was apparently from Asia. And how it was discovered, I hear you might be asking. Well, simply as she was walking to her room down the hall, on one side of the wall was a picture of a pineapple. Now, when the girl saw the picture, she pointed at it and said nanas, which is Indonesian for pineapple. Hence, the witnesses came to a conclusion that it all sounded Asian enough, and they connected all the dots. Now, being often invited to Knoll by Elizabeth, she exhibited several odd behaviors, which were quite alien for a small English segregation at the time. She was fascinated with Chinese imagery. She would often sleep on the floor as if it was quite normal. She would often climb the roof of Knoll in order to pray to her god, which she called Allah Ta'ala. Now, Mr. Worrell grew increasingly suspicious of the young girl and decided to declare her a beggar and sent her to Bristol to be tried for vagrancy. Now, in case you didn't know, back then if you were tried and found guilty of vagrancy or even prostitution, you would be charged with up to 1 month of hard labor. And even 1 month of hard labor for our young aristocrat would be quite scary. And not knowing the local language, surrounded by rough people, you can imagine the horrors. And off she went to Bristol. She even ended up in St. Peter's Hospital for various examinations, but ended up being too much for them to handle, so they sent her back to Almondsbury. At this point in time, our young lady was officially Miss Caraboo, and was treated like some sort of an exotic animal. People were fascinated with the young lady and were coming from all sorts of places just to see her. One of these people ended up being Portuguese sailor by the name of Manuel Eineso, who apparently understood her language and was willing to translate the story of who she is and how she ended up here. Finally, the truth would be revealed to everyone. She was in fact Princess Caraboo from the island of Javasu, somewhere in the Indian Ocean. She was kidnapped from her home by pirates and kept on their ship, where she had to go through several hardships, each day fearing that it might be her last, fearing that some drunk or lust-driven pirate could do horrific things to her body, that they might just throw her off the deck or even sell her to slavery. But luck was on her side. She managed to free herself as the ship was sailing through a Bristol Channel and subsequently jumped into the sea, figuring it was better to gamble her life here than leave it in the hands of pirates. She was able to swim ashore and wander aimlessly until she came across the small village of Almondsbury, and the rest is history. Everyone around her was astonished by her story, and she managed to live a nice and eventful life here, where she would perform fencing for anyone interested in her bow and arrow skills, or even pray to her god Allah Ta'ala. In fact, she even terrified the poor onlookers by swimming completely naked. Those poor souls, how much they must have suffered seeing a naked woman in their pristine English countryside. She even got a portrait of herself painted in all her glory. Quite magnificent. And that's not all, they even managed to hold a ball in her honor. This lasted for 10 whole days. That is until a landlady from Bristol recognized the description of the lady and remembered that she gave her a lodging in her inn some 6 months prior. Now, when she came to Almondsbury and confronted the princess about that, she had no problems answering in a complete English. Apparently, the jig was up. After 3 whole months of being in the spotlight, it was finally over. No more Miss Caraboo, no more Javasu, and no more pirates. Mary Wilcox turns out to be her real name, and she was in fact from Whiteridge in Devon. And get this, she was not even a princess, but rather a daughter of a town cobbler. Somewhere around this time, Mr. Worrell also received a message from Oxford University about his writing that he sent earlier for deciphering, and they noted that it was a humbug language, in other words, gibberish. But what about the Portuguese translator Manuel Enesso, I hear you say? Oh, he was in on it from the start, or rather from the moment they met. He figures if he translates for her and sticks around her, he would also be treated lavishly. He might even gain some monetary compensation out of it. I mean, anything beats the life of a regular sailor. There was also a part of the story where they found marks on the back of her head, which local doctor interpreted as some form of Asian technique, which corroborated the part that she was from Asia. That turned out to be a wet cupping operation, a procedure used to treat an overheating brain, or rather to relieve the pressure from an overheating brain. And it was a locally done procedure, apparently somewhere in poorhouse in London. Oh yeah, the island of Javasu, that shit ain't real. But it does sound somewhat real. I mean, closest thing to a Java island, which is a real place. All of a sudden, all the cards started falling for our Miss Caraboo, one by one. It seems she was able to trick people far and wide, but now it was all gone. In fact, the papers were first to jump on the story, the first one being Exeter Flying Post, with the following: "The wonderful female who has outwitted the doctor, puzzled the learned, and astonished the multitude, turns out to be a vile impostor, a vagrant, wanderer, and daughter of a poor cottager." They also dug up the fact that sometime before she was even imprisoned for 6 months on the charges of thievery. 2 days after, the Royal Cornwall Gazette also released the story, but mostly making fun of the people for falling for such ruse, pointing that it might have done something with her natural beauty. So, what happened now when all was said and done? Well, the villagers were not that mad at her. In fact, they even helped Mary to travel to America. She apparently expressed her desire to travel to America, and Miss Worrell made all the arrangement possible. Now, as it was already a tradition with Mary, somewhere along the journey to the Philadelphia, New stories come to play. Now she was even linked somehow to Napoleon. It was unclear whether the Mary herself spread those rumors on the boat towards the America, or the storytelling from person to person got extremely more wild. The new story was that somehow she came ashore of St. Helena and there met Napoleon, who was of course enchanted by her. No pirates this time, no kidnapping. This time it was storm that blew her ship off the course towards St. Helena, where it hit some rocks and sank, with her being the sole survivor. She stayed in America for 7 years and now tried to get some fame as the infamous Miss Caraboo in Philadelphia, but with little to no success with that. What is fascinating is that she managed to maintain a good relationship with Miss Worrell Elizabeth during her stay in America. After those 7 years, she returned back to England, and there she thought to herself, you know what, maybe people here crave for Miss Caraboo now, and try to charge a shilling per person to see her live in London Gallery. Her acting career didn't take off, for one reason or the other, and she moved back to Bristol and married Robert Baker, with whom she started the business of importing and selling leeches. She died in Bristol at the age of 75 in 1864 and was buried in an unmarked grave. Her daughter, Mary Ann, continued the family tradition of selling leeches, not pretending to be a person you are not. Now, the immediate question that pops in your mind, I imagine, is why? Well, she never explicitly stated the reason for doing all this charades or how she came up with the idea, and nobody harassed her until she admitted it. The fact is that Bristol was a major port city at the time, and there very well could have been pirate ships off of the coast, prowling, searching for trade ships. So that idea checks out. But why Caraboo? Why Javasu? Your guess is as good as mine. She could have technically heard someone speaking something about Indonesia or Java, but who truly knows? I mean, so many different things had to come in line for her to even begin as Miss Caraboo. What if no one answered the first door when she knocked as Miss Caraboo? What if people drove her out of the village immediately? What if someone along the line didn't like her? In fact, she was so lucky that she managed to come across such small village where everyone accepted her with open arms. Anyway, that is my Miss Caraboo from Javasu story. I hope you liked it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Again, that's it from me for today. See ya!